Patel. Good morning, everybody. The hearing for hearing stream 6A, as we've referred it, is about to commence. I'm Robert Schofield, who's chairing the panel. To my right is Commissioner Brosnan. To my left is Commissioner Van Voorthuysen, to whom many people will be familiar. We have reporting officers immediately to the left and some other officers, advisors here. We might have to shuffle around today. Seats are few and rare. So what we'll probably do at morning tea is shuffle around and have Riverbend crew in front of us and then change as we need to. We do also have quite a few people online, which you won't know from the screen necessarily. But they're there listening because we are live streaming successfully today. We had a few technical glitches yesterday, but today is running smooth as, isn't it? Yeah. So welcome everybody. We are here today to hear the submissions requesting the rezoning of the Ahuriri station. We're fairly well primed here in terms of our location, in terms of addressing these sites. That's from Mana Ahuriri Trust, who are also looking to rezone a portion of the 7th Street, Prebison Drive area as well. And then we have Tawanui Developments Limited and their request to rezone land at Riverbend Road. I'm sure everyone's familiar with those. I will do the normal thing about turning phones off and putting them on silent, all that sort of thing. We've got emergency exits here if there is an emergency. And follow council staff, they know what to do. Just as a precursor, I will say that I know it put everyone under a lot of pressure, and I appreciate that, but I think the benefit of having the joint witness statements and the concurrence of opinions has largely assisted the panel in terms of questioning and things. So the amount of matters in contention and our questioning is a lot less now than it was a week ago. So I just want to put that statement up front. So I'm fairly confident that we can get through this hearing today fairly efficiently. So I just want to rest assure most people. So the schedule today is we will hear from the reporting officers, and we've had some very recent, as of yesterday afternoon, new material in terms of amendments to plan provisions and the like, which I will ask Ms Morgan to go through for us, the key points anyway. So we're all familiar with what's now being proposed. And we do have a number of experts in person and online, should we need to ask some questions. I think another point I'd like to make is too that we're now really only focused on the matters of in contention, I should say. So if there's still points in dispute, we want to know about those. Where there's largely matters of agreement, we probably won't be probing unless we have one or two our own sort of questions and lines of inquiry. So we will hear from the officers first, and the only submitter other than the requesting parties are the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and that will be just before morning tea. We've jiggled with the schedule. Normally we have allocated time slots for everybody. This time I think quite appropriately the hearings administrators suggested a sort of more flexible time frame. So we will hear from the parties in respect of the three main rezoning requests. So we will hear from Tawanui Developments Limited on Riverbend Road first, and that's led by Mr Winchester, who oh, there you are. Hi. We'll get you after morning tea, Mr Winchester, to come up and with whoever else you would like up here so we can talk face to face, and experts will be able to sit at the table over there. Thank you. So that's the first block, and then we just hear about 7th Street and Prebison Drive, and then finally Ahuriri Station. And in the normal course of proceedings, as with all of the hearings for the proposed plan, we will get a right of reply report from the reporting officer, usually at least 2 weeks, where the time frame is getting very, very squeezed at the moment in terms of the council's frame and the elections and all that sort of good stuff. So we are looking at getting a reply from the officer within 2 weeks, so by the sort of beginning of September. So we can be as efficient as we can in getting our recommendations to the council out as soon as we can. So thank you for that. Are there any other matters of procedure and things people want to ask about? No? The Quinn? Yep. Okay. Without ado, we will turn to Ms. Morgan and welcome, who's the reporting officer of most of the rezoning requests for the proposed plan. So this is the second time round for you, so
Yes.
welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. So I have prepared a brief, a little bit longer than brief, but a summary statement which I can talk through,
Yes,
and perhaps just focusing on the highlights of that. We do also have Jerry Kessels online, who has also prepared a summary statement. Hopefully he's there. But would you like to hear from Jerry first, or would you like me to go through my summary statement first?
Perhaps Mr. Kessels can say his piece. I have read his opening statement, but if he wouldn't mind just coming in briefly and just reiterating the main points. Welcome, Mr. Kessels.
Thank you very much, and good morning.
morning.
I'm just dealing with 3 screens now, so I'll just open my opening statement now.
Okay.
Can I take paragraphs 1 to 9 as read, please?
Certainly. Yes. All is read. Yeah, taking all is read. Yeah, as Commissioner Van Voorthuysen said, just basically you've only got the one main point in your opening statement, isn't it? The embankment area. Okay, so if you could just maybe just talk to that point, that would be great.
Would you like to read my statement, or just
talk around the embankment area and your recommendations to that area?
Sure. Well, I've been in fairly close contact with Miss Barrett, who is the ecologist representing the submitter, and we've had a number of productive discussions. And I have visited the site when I ground truthed this with one of the council officers back in 2004. But Miss Barrett and her associate went and had a good look, and they provided some very helpful additional information, which is in more detail than what I did when I did my SNA review of the site. They did find a threatened at-risk native musk, which is a small kind of herby plant that lives in these saline conditions there. And they also found some infill, some weeds, but I did note that my original assessment that the site is a wetland, and it is for large parts dominated by characteristics of a saline wetland, being somewhat unusual because it's been uplifted from the 1931 earthquake. It still retains those characteristics. And even though the industrial area has been next to it for several decades, I've reviewed a lot of the historical photos. And it did have an infill event a few years ago, which took out about 8,000 square metres. It still seems to be hydrologically intact to a large degree from what I can gather. But weighing against that, those wetland values, it is relatively small. It is isolated from the main Ahuriri estuary. And when I look at the attribute criteria of the NPSIB, which we're also using to assess wetlands here without any appropriate other criteria being available to assess wetlands, because as you know, the NPSIB focuses on terrestrial ecosystems and mobile species. When I apply those attributes, while it complies with one of the attributes there, it doesn't comply with the others in terms of being quite small and isolated and better represented elsewhere in the ecological district, in this case the main body of the Ahuriri estuary. So I'm comfortable reducing the status of that area from SHIV to SIV8, to a restoration area, and that gives scope for opportunities for restoration without necessarily triggering the Section 6C obligations. And in my view, restoration if you follow the effects management hierarchy in terms of addressing impacts on biodiversity, and you're looking at residual adverse effects that are unavoidable, you could go down to the offsetting option for that, which helpfully MPSIB talks about that in Appendix 3. So if you're meeting those criteria in Appendix 3 for offsetting, and you can show a net gain, then restoration may actually, well, it doesn't preclude the option, doesn't exclude rather, the option of doing biodiversity offsetting, which may, if done well, lead to a net gain in biodiversity. So that's basically it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the panel? Commissioner Warnhausen.
Yes, Mr. Kessels, just two matters. First of all, just turning to your paragraph 13. And the second line, you say, my reconsidered view is that the site does meet. Did you mean does not meet?
Yes, unfortunately, I did fix that typo, but it didn't seem to get through in the final draft, yes, and thank you for pointing that out. In my version, it says does not meet.
Yeah, doesn't in mine. Okay, now look, in your paragraph 14, you said verbally you think this should be classified as a restoration area.
Yes.
I guess it's only fair I put to you, I'm not convinced that's appropriate. When I look at the definition of restoration area that's in the eco chapter, it says it's an area containing indigenous vegetation or habitat with significant ecological value at a local citywide scale. Now, on your own evidence, I don't think the site meets that criteria.
Well, I disagree when I look, sorry, respectfully, when I look at other sites that I have recommended for restoration. I think it still, as I said, I think it still meets a significant value in terms of the local area, because it still, in my view, is a functioning wetland, and it still has quite a high component of indigenous saline wetland species in it, including a nationally at-risk species.
All right, so I look forward to hearing from the applicant's ecologist on that particular matter, whether or not this little degraded wetland meets the definition of restoration area. That was all. Thank you. Oh, and I did note your paragraph 15 conclusion, which I think is pretty important, the last line of your paragraph 15, which we'll obviously consider going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I had a similar line of questioning, and my question was going to be, how does the ecological value of that embankment wetland compare to the other similar wetlands in the district? And I was just interested, I guess, around that threshold, but I think you've made your position quite clear on that, the Commissioner Van Voorthausen. So, yeah, just if you had any additional comments around, I guess, comparison around that restoration area classification for similar areas.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. And this area is unique in some ways in that it is an isolated area of Ceylon wetland that we have identified, and notably that the University of Waikato ecologists identified too. So it wasn't my view alone. But we know it has some threats to it, which are not unusual for wetlands. It is an unusual wetland because it is a remnant saline wetland surrounded by development. But as I stated in my opening comments, it has been there for a long time, and it still seems to be hanging on in terms of containing its core wetland ecological values, functional and structural.
Thank you for that. My follow-up question, I guess, is around the offsetting assumption. So I think you say that if it was lost due to development, you mentioned biodiversity offsetting could achieve a net gain. So how confident are you that that offsetting realistically could replicate those ecological functions you're talking about, particularly for the at-risk musk species?
Well, as Ms. Barrett pointed out in her evidence, that musk is widely distributed elsewhere in the locality, although it is nationally threatened. So I think there's opportunities to translocate the small population to another area if you can replicate the hydrological and salinity characteristics of this site. Ms. Barrett gave a scenario in her evidence where she indicated that that's possible to do further north along the one of the channels of the estuary there, where you could dig out an area and with some help from engineers and a survey determine the appropriate ground levels that would recreate this habitat there. So I don't believe it's easy. I think saline wetland restoration is more difficult than freshwater wetland restoration, but it is possible, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just a follow-up question. So you're satisfied that your recommendation that it be zoned for as a restoration area is consistent with the approach taken to other restoration areas in the city?
Well, I think so. I mean, all of these areas that have been in dispute through this process are the ones that are sitting on this fence, so to speak, and there haven't been many of them. This area here, in my view, doesn't, as I've said, doesn't tick the box to meet SIVH, but I think it has enough attributes there to have restoration potential. And certainly when I compare to other ecosystem types around, it's probably a reasonably repairable example if the landowner chose to go down that route.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. No more questions. Ms. Morgan.
Okay, all right. So I am conscious of the time, and I understand that you'd like me to take you through the planning provisions as well, just focusing on the key changes there. So I'll keep this statement very brief.
Just a minute. Do we need to actually go through the provisions at this stage, or shall we wait to hear from the applicant's planners and then hot tub hearing the planner and put questions to them collectively?
Oh, that's a good point.
Because we've read them.
Good question, yes. I still think it would be useful just to sort of outline the key changes that you've made to the provisions, just to familiarise everyone with that.
Okay.
But we may look at a bit of a more free discussion when it comes to the provisions. We have, for instance, Mr. Holder in front of us as well.
Yes, yes. And I guess the first thing I'd say on the provisions is it's been quite a fast process this week, and there's still quite a bit of checking and refinement to do, and cross-checking with some of the other chapters as well, and making sure that it all sort of ties together across the PDP. So that step is still to come.
Okay, so, yeah.
So then just the summary statement, perhaps if we just go down to paragraph 6. So as I set out in the section 42A, report natural hazards and the extent to which they can be appropriately avoided and or mitigated on these sites is really the key issue for rezoning in my view. And the rebuttal evidence from the submitters, as well as the further discussions through expert conferencing, has, as I understand it, resulted in agreement between the council's experts, Mr. Bayer and Mr. Bradshaw, and the submitters' experts, such that they are satisfied matters of natural hazards can be appropriately addressed through the resource consent stage. So really the focus of the discussions this week and during the expert conferencing has been on the appropriateness of the planning provisions to address comprehensively the range of natural hazard matters that will need to be at the detailed design stage. And in light of those matters being worked through, moving through to paragraph 9, I am satisfied that those outstanding matters have been addressed, which I identified in the section 42A, and I'll come back to the matter of Mangaharuru Tangatu Trust, but I am overall satisfied and recommend that the submissions seeking rezoning of the sites are accepted, subject to the planning provisions, which I'll talk through shortly.
Just to let the hearing know, we did get that email this morning, last night.
Yes.
The approval of the trust to Amana Hariri's request. So
Yes,
thank you for
yes. And I'm still, I am keen to have a chat with Mr Campbell about that. I think there were a few recommendations in there which could have some implications for the planning provisions, but I'm keen to have a discussion with him about that. Moving through, just a quick note on the section 32, and to note that I will, subject to the outcome of today and the further discussions that will be happening, I will provide that full section 32 analysis in the reply report, and that will obviously build on the work that's already been done in the evidence in the 42A. At paragraphs 10 and 11, I have provided an update on the future development strategy. It is, the upshot is it is still draft, but obviously all of the technical analysis and the work that has been done to prepare that draft and to get it to where it is today is, in my opinion, highly relevant to the discussion. And at paragraph 11 there, I have just set out the FDS, how the draft FDS and the decision-making relates to the Riverbend site, which is relevant to that discussion. But despite that, Riverbend is identified in HPUD's 2017, which is the current growth strategy, and it is identified in the RPS as an appropriate residential greenfield growth area. At paragraphs 12 and 13, I have just provided some context around the Council's natural hazards variation, as well as the draft of the National Policy Statement for natural hazards. Obviously, that has no weight whatsoever, but it has come up in expert conferencing discussions this week, and we have been aware of the direction of travel, if I can put it that way. And then moving through to Ahuriri Station, I think I will just take all of this as read. Perhaps just picking up on the points there around the Hawke's Bay Regional Council hearing presentation. So I have reviewed that. In my opinion, the matters that they have raised have been appropriately addressed by the experts, and they will be addressed through the planning provisions and subsequent resource consent stage. There was some commentary from the Regional Council around the timing of development and whether these sites do need to be zoned now. In my opinion, they can be zoned now, and it is appropriate, in my opinion, to zone land to meet long-term demand, and that's certainly the approach that's been taken to zoning within the urban area, provided the statutory tests can be met, which have been worked through. And I have just picked out there the sequencing policy from the RPS, and in my opinion, the rezoning does meet that criteria, particularly as it relates to infrastructure and how that ties in with the planning provisions that are proposed. Yes, paragraph 20 there, Mangaharuru Tangatu Trust, that email confirms and addresses that matter, which was provided this morning. Moving through to Severn Street, we've had the discussion around the biodiversity area notation. I'm also keen to hear from Ms Barnett today. And in terms of the development area provisions, Mr Holder and I have worked on those over the course of this week, and I'll talk through those shortly. But really the key matters that they seek to address are natural hazards, transport assessment, building on the trip generation triggers which are proposed for the to apply district-wide, as well as urban design considerations, although they have a reasonably narrow focus. And then finally there on Riverbend, again, we have had a number of discussions, Mr. Bradshaw and myself and Ms. Lincoln, with the submitters experts, and Mr. Bradshaw is now satisfied that the mitigation, broadly at least, the mitigation solution can be addressed is appropriate and can be addressed through the resource consent stage. And while there are significant engineering works required for this site, as well as all of the sites that we're talking about today, from an urban form perspective, the site is well located, close to the existing urban area, and can meet, in my opinion, the relevant RPS and strategic direction objectives and policies, which I've listed in paragraph 25 there. So perhaps I'll leave that there, and then if you'd like, I can just talk through some of the key. I'll keep it brief.
Okay.
Do that or go in?
Or I'm happy to leave it if you
Just the
prefer.
questions.
Well, I think there are a number of questions I have
Yep.
of some of the changes, and they're just general questions, nothing too, some of them are picky. If you wouldn't mind, I think the first change you've identified, let me get this out, is in terms of the role of the master plan for Ahuriri Station. So we're looking at the ASDA.
Yes. That's, so
Look at that.
if I go,
You describe it as aspirational sort of plan for the development of the area. It's a slightly different approach to how development areas in the city are dealt with, where there's fairly fixed master plan and, and there's different components and different policies for those. Are you comfortable with the sort of the aspirational approach taken for this development area?
well, look, I agree it is quite unusual, and that in the Section 42A report, my recommendation was to not include the master plan in the development area. However, having had some further discussions with Mr. Campbell, I have proposed further text which clarifies the function and role of that master plan. So if I can refer to, where is it? There's some text in the introduction, at the very end of the introduction, which talks about the master plan sets out Mana Ahuriri's aspirations for development in the ASDA. And then where is it? The text at the end, we don't have page numbers on this, which is not helpful, but it says the master plan below is included for information purposes only, and sets out Mana Ahuriri's aspirations for development. And that provision, I think, makes it very clear that in order to give effect to that master plan, further structure planning and amendments to the zoning would be required. So with those text changes, I'm satisfied that the master plan could be included. But equally, if it were not to be included, that could sit outside of the plan as well.
Mm-hmm. It's aspirational except for the 2 precincts that are recommended to be rezoned, and
Yep.
it's okay. And I looked at the planning standards definition of development area, and you could interpret it in quite a liberal kind of way in terms of having aspirational master plans. It doesn't say they have to be fixed in concrete. Okay.
So perhaps if I go back to, if I start with the two, if I focus on the Severn development area, which you hadn't seen in the submitted rebuttal evidence, and perhaps the changes to the Riverbend Road development area. And I'm not going to go through this line by line, by the way. For the Severn development area, the approach here has been to pull through the relevant cultural issues and aspirations from the Ahuriri development area and precincts. So you'll see a lot of similarity there. And then in terms of the objectives and policies, as I mentioned earlier, this is really about focusing on effects on the transport network and making sure that they are appropriately addressed, because there are some specific issues with this site, and Ms Harrison and Mr Curson can talk to those if needed. And then in terms of urban design, under the large format retail zone, buildings are a permitted activity. Mr Brewer's evidence for the submitter has set out a range of urban design related aspirations, which in my opinion do warrant some further consideration through the resource consent process. But it is important to recognise that this is a large format retail area. The activity has specific functional requirements, and this is not the same level of design and amenity that you might expect in the city centre or that matter. So the focus has really been on targeting that assessment to the activity that's proposed. And in terms of natural hazards, the objectives, policies, rule framework and assessment matters are the same as what is proposed for the Ahuriri precincts as well as Riverbend. So that really seeks to take or align with a risk-based approach. And the key issue there from a policy perspective is ensuring that development avoids or mitigates significant natural hazard risk on people and property, not only within the development but on surrounding land. And the policies also detail the types of mitigation measures that may be appropriate, albeit those will need to be considered in detail in the future. Policy 4 again is consistent across all of the development areas and precincts, and details what a natural hazard risk assessment needs to contain, and that has been worked through with the input of all of the experts, including Mr Hooker and Mr Ryan Hamill as well.
Can I make two observations at this point?
Yes.
One is the issue statements, and I'm being a pedantic planner here, are a little bit different to your normal issue statements in that they actually say what you're going to do about the issue in the statement, which is a bit out of sync with the rest of the plan. The other one too is I notice there's no real sort of objectives or policies relating to restoration or, should we say, natural solutions to the stormwater issues and that in terms of sort of an issue and an objective, although they're a key component, I would say, of the master plan, a key attribute of the whole process and the whole development plan. So that's just an observation. I'm not too hung up on that at the moment. Any sort of questions from the panel at this point?
Now, look, I've got a number of very pedantic questions on some of the detailed wording and the provisions, but what I intend to do is to put those questions collectively to yourself and the applicants' planners and sort of hot tub the two of you, so Mr Campbell and Mr Holder, so I'll just ask the questions once rather than twice, and I can get your collective view at that stage, but they're very minor points.
Okay, all right. Would it assist if I just talk through the highlights from Riverbend, or shall I leave it?
Yes, just briefly, because I don't think the level of changes are too significant.
So this is really just amending the draft development area provisions which were included in Kauanui's submission. And again, I've talked about the natural hazards, so I'm not going to go over that again. But in terms of maybe what has been deleted might be helpful. So Objective 2 and Policy 2 have been deleted or recommending to be deleted on the basis that they are appropriately covered by the underlying zone around housing choice and that sort of thing. Then Objective 6 and where is it? Policy 5, I also propose to delete on the basis that it will be changing to an urban zoning, and the rural activities that are currently there will have existing use rights. It just didn't seem necessary to me. But otherwise, in terms of the changes, They largely align with what I've already discussed and what's proposed in the Ahuriri and Severn precincts as well. The assessment criteria and the development area plan are largely unchanged.
Okay, thank you. There's a bit of feedback going.
There is. So unless you wanted me to go through the other precincts, I could just leave it there.
No, the only observation I'd make at this point, and I'll turn to the panel if they have any other sort of general statements, is in respect of Severn Street. Part of the request is to rezone that corner of State Highway 2 with Prepperson Drive, the roundabout corner, to general industrial zone, but it kind of seems like a bit of an orphan in terms of the assessment and the evidence. We've got no real traffic evidence on how that site may best be developed in terms of access to it. We don't really have any urban design assessment or evidence on, it's a fairly prominent location. It's almost at a sort of gateway point to the city for the expressway. Those sorts of aspects haven't really been covered thoroughly in my view. So just sort of alerting the submitter on that sort of point too. There's this, it's just proposed to rezone it to general industrial and that's it kind of thing. Is there any special attributes of that site that need particular regard in a policy sense or a rule sense or a standard sense? If not, that's fine, but I'd like to be sort of convinced that this process. So here you go. Any comments from the panel at this point? No. Okay, thank you. Just turning to the schedule, so just to speed things up with 9:36 here, are there any questions from the panel in respect of the other expert evidence for us from the council, from people in front of us?
No, not at this stage.
No? No, don't. So thank you. Thank you. I think we've reached a fairly good place in terms of an agreement in expert views on this point. Do we have Hawke's Bay Regional Council here? Would you like to come to the submitters table as yesterday? And we have your pre-circulated written statement. Thank you very much for that.
Right, good morning.
Good morning. So we don't have Mr. Gutzel here today?
No, he was looking after the hearing yesterday. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to present this morning, and just wanted to start by acknowledging the huge amount of work that has gone in from the staff at Napier City Council. I am Nicola Nicholson. I am the Policy and Planning Manager at Hawke's Bay Regional Council. Apologies from Katrina Brunton. She had hoped to be here today but is unable to make it. I am an associate member of the NZPI. I have 15 years experience in planning in the private and public sector, and have qualifications in both environmental management and sociology. Following on from yesterday's line of question, I believe where you asked around our statement, we'd just like to start off by making an amendment to paragraph 1.2 and amend this to be an expert witness statement. So I will pass over to Dale Meredith, who has worked on the submission, to take you through in further detail.
Good morning. And in terms of expert witness statement, I hold a degree, Bachelor of Town Planning and postgraduate diploma in guidance and counselling, aware of all of the statement of evidence requirements, and have probably over 30 years of experience in planning at a district and regional level. I have two corrections to make to the statement of evidence. The first is at paragraph 4.3, which states that the regional policy statement provisions are addressed in section 5. That should read sections 6 to 9. And the second is an update at section 8 on plan change 7 outstanding water bodies. We can now, with a high level of confidence, say that that plan change will be made operative via public notice on the 29th of August 2025. The essence of our statement is that for these developments, a precautionary approach is appropriate, and that we are concerned that, and I'm concerned as a planner, that making rezoning decisions of this significance, where you have land with multiple natural hazards facing it, in the absence of the strategic direction for the district plan, is premature. And so we would be cautioning a pausing in terms of moving to standard urban residential or business type zoning provisions at this stage. We have not been privy to any of the expert conferencing that may have occurred between the planners in the preceding weeks, so not up to speed with the changes that are currently on the table from the City Council's team. In terms of our statement, the operative RPS provides the opportunity to make decisions to avoid or mitigate natural hazard risk. The opportunity is there to avoid, the opportunity is also there to mitigate, and that really is the crux of the issue that we're facing. Are we looking at areas where development should be avoided, or is mitigation more appropriate? And with mitigation, what is the nature of that mitigation, and also what are the costs and where do they fall? While the RPS provides the opportunity to address natural hazards, the Hawke's Bay Independent Flood Review, which was undertaken in 2024, strongly indicated that our regional policy statement did need to be updated, and that we did need to provide strong direction in terms of natural hazard management. So where the balance is between avoid, remedy, mitigate. At this stage, we have not had time to prepare a change to the RPS, so the RPS stands in its current form. I think really the summary here is that we have 3 critical areas which the Regional Council has an interest in: natural hazards in particular, also the ecological impacts, where we do have now an outstanding water body in the environment adjoining the Ahuriri Station site. It does have cultural and spiritual values, including with taonga. And there's no question between any of the parties of the importance of that site. It also has an important aquatic bird habitat and native fish habitat. So it really is quite a special area. Our ecologists have provided some comments. They are not available to attend today, but they have raised concerns. Again, through not being party to any of the expert caucusing beforehand, we're not sure to what extent the concerns raised by the ecologists have been addressed. So essentially, we would just urge serious caution about looking to rezone at this stage because of the natural hazard risk, the potential for ecological impact, and the infrastructure situation.
I think she's finished, right?
The comments you say you received from your ecological advisors, what are they in terms of concerns?
So in paragraph 10.2, we've summarised the 6 matters that they have identified, and their memo is attached as Appendix 4. I would say in the first instance they have said they are new to the area, so they are not wanting to come in at this stage and make comprehensive statements in terms of ecological assessment when they're not fully up to speed for Hawke's Bay. So generally they would have expected more clarity in terms of how the ecological impacts were going to, particularly the business development towards the airport, the impact on the salt marsh there, the impact of the mitigation for natural hazards to raise the building platforms by upwards of 3 metres. The ecological impact of that does not seem to have been clearly addressed. Impact of possible future business activities on the salt marshes and wetlands. In their view, it was insufficient just to rely on the provisions of the NPS, which kind of set up the framework. They felt that more work did need to be done. And that's really the 5th point there as well. They are available to take questions. They would need to be written questions.
There was also a concern around the effects on the adjacent West Shore Wildlife Reserve and whether or not those had been also considered.
West Shore, now just remind me, the West Shore
Wildlife Reserve.
is where in relationship to the proposed rezoning?
So
Between the airport and the
coast.
Okay, where the expressway joins onto the northern.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the panel?
Look, just 2 observations. First of all, you make comment in what's now your planning evidence about the strategic directions of the district plan. We as a panel have an advantage over you because we've considered those matters very early in the process. We've made preliminary deliberations on what those provisions should say, so we're more fully informed than you on that in that regard. So I think you can just put your mind to ease in terms of how the proposals sit with those strategic directions. I can't go into any more detail on that at this stage. You'll have to wait till our decisions are released or our recommendations are released. And secondly, from what your presentation has outlined to us this morning, would it be fair to say that you and your advisors have not had the opportunity to read all of the documentation that we've read, namely all of the Section 42A reports, the reply reports, the evidence in chief, the rebuttal evidence and the joint witness statements? It seems to me a lot of the issues that you've raised have been addressed quite thoroughly already.
We have not had the opportunity to view the joint witness statements.
What about all of the evidence and material that's preceded that?
The ecologist viewed all of the evidence before writing their summary statement.
That's surprising. All right. Thank you. No further questions.
Any questions? No, I don't have any further questions. So thank you very much for your time. Okay, according to the schedule, we are supposed to take a break at 10:30, but we are somewhat early, so in the interest of efficiency, perhaps we could do the roster shift, and we are due to hear from Tawanui Developments Limited in respect of Riverbend Road. So Mr. Winchester, would you like to come up front? Any other person you'd like to have next to you?
I have, good morning, Mr Chair, I'll just get seated.
Okay.
We are running ahead of time, but I suspect we can
Yes.
keep rolling through. So I have with me Mr Carew, Mr Holder is here, and in terms of the panel's indication that it had no questions for Mr Evers and Mr Pomfret, they are not present. Ms Landon is, just in case.
Right.
So legal submissions were filed. I don't think I need to speak to them. They're a snapshot in time. Things have moved on. And from my point of view, I don't have any particular legal issues I wish to raise or any procedural issues I wish to raise. So unless you have any questions of me, it's probably most efficient to move on to the witnesses and if you have any questions for them, I suspect that would be the appropriate way to proceed.
Thank you, Mr Winchester. I don't have any questions for you directly. Any from the panel?
No, the legal submissions were helpful, but no questions, clarification.
Mr Wilson? No questions for you, Mr Winchester.
Thank you. That's fine. In terms of the order, if there's any technical issues relating to land development matters, they probably logically should go first. So Mr Carew is here. He's provided a statement of evidence which is comprehensive. It was not rebuttal evidence, it was evidence in chief. There's been no particular challenge to matters identified in that evidence in the Section 42A report. But I'll perhaps hand him over for any questions, or would it be helpful if there was an overall summary?
I think so, just particularly given the submission we've just heard from the Regional Council. I think it might be appropriate to just have Mr Carew talk to that aspect in particular. I know it's asking him to do it on the wing, so to speak, but if that would be appropriate.
I'm sure he's well ready and capable of dealing with that now, so I'll hand over to Mr Carew.
Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners. Carl Carew from Development Now. So in regard to the natural hazards aspect, which has obviously been quite a hot topic for all three of these sites, but in particular Riverbend here, flooding has been a hot topic since 2020, the November event, where our site in particular came into spotlight, and same again with Cyclone Gabriel. We've done quite a thorough investigation both on the ground during both those events, as well as the modelling work done with expert modellers, council, to work through the challenges that were presented. So both those particular events, which were very different events but had a similar outcome with quite readily documented flooding of the site, were considered through the technical stormwater modelling work undertaken, and we're very confident, given the modelling results, the solutions proposed, that the proposed solutions to mitigate those issues well and truly present a resilient community moving forward. The largest component here is offsetting, so where the site itself is a natural basin, the city has benefited from a natural storage of stormwater for a very long time, and by filling that in, it's perceived, where does that water go? That is the question that everyone is asking. Hence, that's where the southern basin, which is significant, 9 hectares, comes into its own in terms of taking that volume and providing that adjacent to the site. So that in itself ensures that our water, as we fill up the site with dirt, roads, houses, whatever we're doing, that doesn't go on to the neighbouring community. That goes into a facility that's specifically designed to receive that water. So it's not only the displacement, it's also the additional runoff that comes from urbanisation. So that sits and stores within the main stormwater management area. That is the key stormwater upgrade that assists in managing those natural hazard issues. There's also a list which I've listed within my evidence as to other identified upgrades that need to be completed as part of the development work, and they've been jointly agreed with the council, Stantec being the modelling advisors and Development Nous, working through a suitable outcome in terms of what that scenario looks like in the 100-year event. The other aspect, coastal hazards seem to come up quite a lot, and I've documented that the site itself is not what sits outside the coastal inundation that has been recently reported on in the Clifton to Tongoia modelling work that was created. There is a backwater effect that comes up the cross-country drain, and it should be noted that due to the proposed stormwater management area at the lower level, which is being designed, that will actually also assist in mitigating that coastal inundation to a wider part of the community. The site itself is not subject to it, but the wider community will gain a benefit because we're storing water at a much lower level. The other aspects around geotech, lateral spread, settlement, those sorts of things, that is another way in which the mitigation of natural effects is being dealt with. A lot of that is a direct result of having to lift the site anyway because of the flood immunity requirements. So we're creating that raft of good engineered material to make sure that future housing development is well and truly established on stable ground. I'm not sure if there's any other natural hazard aspects you would like me to discuss.
I'm just looking at the Appendix 1 map that showed the Cyclone Gabriel flow path, shall we say?
Yes.
If you could just lead me through that. I have read the evidence, but I think it'd be useful just at this point just to sort of how that proposes to work. So the most of the flow was from the south, from the two river mouths, over the Awatoto golf course and then through the cross-country drain to this site.
Correct.
Which is
Yeah.
probably all above
Coming from
the channel.
the
of the
south
drain.
and the east, correct.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I visited the site the day of the cyclone, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the site was dry. You could walk across it. The cross-country drain itself wasn't materially flooded either. We then went and investigated further towards the coast along Te Awa Ave and up into the Maraenui Golf Course, where the far side of the Maraenui Golf Course on the Awatoto public course, the water levels were very high up against the historic stop bank that exists there. There was a breach of that stop bank because the regional council contractors at the time needed to release some of that water, and what they did was breach that stop bank, and the water actually went through along Te Awa Ave to the cross-country drain pump stations to make use of those significant pump stations that were there to start to draw that water down, and that occurred for a couple of days. And so the water was actually, it wasn't coming from our own catchment, it was the super catchment of the Tutakuri River that came over the initial stop banks and then through the secondary stop banks back up the cross-country drain, which is what the influence was for the flooding in the area.
Okay, thank you. And the proposed backflow ponds, as they're called,
Yes.
they would address that overflow that would actually go.
Correct. So that the volume that went that way would end up coming the other way to the south to the ponds. So
Right.
they're presented at a much lower level, so water actually starts going into them a lot earlier, whereas in the current state, the water would effectively have to fill up the cross-country drain in its entirety and then overtop back into the site. So we actually start seeing the benefit of that pond a lot earlier. So there's a much improved solution there. So whilst we're storing that volume plus a lot more over top of the displacement volume, there is a marked benefit for those earlier stages of such a hazard issue.
And during most times, what would the use of that land be? Just a reserve,
green reserve.
vested in the council?
Planted out, vested in the council, correct, yes. Yeah, they're becoming very common stormwater, low-impact stormwater solutions, these basin-type outcomes, because they're a lot more resilient than pipes and pumps. So we still need the pipes and the pumps, but this provides that backdoor sort of protection, especially in the lower events. I mean, they're designed for the larger events, but the lower level events, your 10-year event that you're designed for and that sort of thing, this is going to really show its benefit to the community.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, that's addressing the cross-country drain issue and that sort of flow issue.
Yes.
In terms of other potential breaches of the Tutakuri sort of further upstream, does it address those sorts of risks?
It would assist any water that comes down the cross-country drain. So it provides additional volume to the cross-country drain storage. So one thing that was established through the modelling is the pumps at the end of the cross-country drain are actually consented for a much larger discharge volume. So they could be upgraded in the future. The challenge that the model proved was at the moment with the current setup is we can only get so much water to the pumps. There's throttles through the different culverts and profiles of the channels and that sort of thing. So we've got these massive pumps out there, but it's only as much water as we can get there. So having a facility that can actually hold some additional water is going to prove a benefit as well. And we have had discussions and suggestions with the council sort of adjacent to these discussions, suggesting that they may want to look at similar solutions along the drainage channels to further assist.
Okay, sort of other backflow ponds sort of at strategic locations?
Correct,
kind of
yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Okay, and in terms of risks further upstream, as I said, like potential breaches of Tutakuri further upstream, you're satisfied that they're not likely to impact on this particular area?
Or they will, as much as that impact on the rest of Napier. It's a very difficult thing to model in terms of the stop banks are designed to the 100-year event.
Yep.
You get a greater event, that may well be something that breaches and comes across the top.
So it's a broader risk, not
It's
just...
a much broader risk. It's not specific to the site, no. We are setting immunity levels that are higher than other parts of the area, so we're probably at lesser risk than other areas, but it doesn't say that we're completely immune, no.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the panel?
Just a couple of very minor points. Your paragraph 25, you talk about, and you've mentioned it verbally, lowering the pumps, the cross-country drain pumps, those
Yes.
great big huge pumps by the 18th tee on the Maraenui Golf Course. How much lower?
When we say lower, that's just a float set, so we're not physically lowering the pumps
Okay.
itself. It's just the trigger in which the pumps engage.
And how much lower would that be?
Or we're talking a few hundred mils, it's not massive. So what that effectively does is engage the pumps earlier.
Yeah. Okay. And just another very minor point, out of interest, at your paragraph 35, towards the bottom of that paragraph, you said a couple of exceptions where the associated dwellings did not comply with the standards post their construction.
Yes.
What was that?
I believe that some of the very early houses within the Te Awa development area were established prior to the structure plan work being completed and the minimum floor levels being completed. So I understand there was only a couple that weren't built to that standard.
So they didn't have the proper minimum floor
No,
level?
that's
Okay.
right.
But that's unlikely to happen with this current proposal, isn't it?
Correct, yeah. We're a few hundred mils above where the Te Awa minimum floor levels are.
Yeah. And just in terms of the Gabrielle flood situation that the chair questioned you about in your diagram in your appendix, would it be fair to say that scenario is reasonably unlikely to reoccur? It would, for that to reoccur, we'd have to have a breach of the Tutakuri
It was
stop
an
banks.
exceptionally-
We'd have to have a breach of the Tutakuri stop banks, and we'd have to have the regional council deciding to breach the stop bank on the golf course again for that scenario to repeat, wouldn't we?
Correct.
And that's not very likely.
Highly
is it?
unlikely.
Highly unlikely.
It's not something you'd normally put into a matrix to assess the risk, no.
All right, and that was all. That's the only questions I had for you. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to address the statement around significant natural hazards. So there is a point of difference, obviously, between your expertise and that of Hawke's Bay Regional Council, which you heard this morning. And so I just wanted you don't address those words in your evidence as such.
No, well, firstly, I'm not an expert as such in that
Yes.
particular piece, but the reality is, unless Napier's going to have a managed retreat and give up on any development in Napier, I don't see this site as any different to any intensification in Napier, medium density upzoning and that sort of thing. So we're doing everything we can, given the known standard requirements in front of us that we have to address. We're outside of those coastal issues that we can see. We're mitigating the stormwater issues, and as well as the seismic ones. I'm not really sure what else. We can only address the standards that we're required to. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No, I don't have any further questions for you. Thank you, Mr. Carew. Winchester?
Well, thank you, sir. Mr. Holder is available. He's obviously participated in the preparation of the joint witness statement, and obviously I heard your indications that you had some questions of detail. Possibly it might be efficient to put those questions to the reporting officer and Mr. Holder jointly, and we're entirely content with that. You may have some background questions first, so I'll just hand it.
Yeah. Well,
Mr. Holder can fend for himself quite
as
easily.
I
so-
indicated, I like, rather than necessarily a pure hot topping thing, is just to have a sort of discussion amongst the two planners around the provisions. I mean, I personally don't have a lot of questions around the Riverbend Road provisions, but my panel members may. Mr. Holder, do you have any sort of general comments at this point before we look at detail around the planning provisions and changes made to provisions?
Thank you, sir. No, not particularly. I think we spent quite a bit of time going through these provisions on all the sites and listened to the various experts. I guess prefacing some of the work that's been done, what came out of this natural hazards component was discussions with the coastal or the hazard experts, was the discussion around proportional risk as well, and how you deal with hazards, and it probably leads on to the question of this morning as to what sort of events we're planning for. And basically what it came down to is we can't anticipate every possible event that would occur, and how we might deal with those, and that's sort of what came through in some of the planning provisions we were looking at, but doing the best we can with the information we have, form that the backdrop to that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Holder. Shall I open up to questions to the panel?
Mr. Holder, I should know the answer to this, but I can't remember what the answer is. The proposed Riverbend backflow ponds, what's going to be the underlying zoning of those ponds?
Rural, as I understand it, rural.
Or remain RPROS?
I need to go back. Yes, check that.
Is that your understanding? So
Rural
just stay
production,
RPROS.
sorry,
Okay, thought it was. And at your paragraph 8.3, you talk about a parcel of land remaining as rural production. Is that the same ponds, is it?
No, there's a strip of land within the development itself up towards further up Riverbend Road, where there's a church activity. There's some existing activities that are on there which have some existing use type rights, if you like.
Yeah.
We don't have the right to change that. I guess it just made sense to leave it as it was.
Yeah, I do recall that now. Look, I've just got a couple of very minor matters for the provisions.
Yes.
And I think Ms Morgan has indicated that there'll be a little bit more refining of those provisions done between yourself and her before, and that can form part of the reply report. So I'll just put these minor matters to you.
Yes.
Have you got in front of you the latest suite of provisions that you and Ms Morgan? Yep,
so that-
right. So DEV policy 4,
Policy 4.
and you mentioned that those words at the end of the first paragraph, the need to manage natural hazard risks proportionately. That's not a phrase I've come across before, and if I was wearing a decision maker hat, I'd wonder what that means. Can you explain what the intent was behind that?
Sarah, that was sort of what I was discussing earlier on. This is what the experts and the hazards experts were saying. There's this proportional risk that we can't plan for every single thing. We're doing the best we can. Hence, we decided with them that that's the sort of wording we should be putting in.
Yeah.
Mr. Ryan Hamill and co. So with that, and the council witnesses. It's a hard measure, but again, that's what my understanding is some future changes to hazard provisions and stuff would deal with that. But that was, I wouldn't say a sticking point, it was a point of discussion.
I guess I'd invite you and Ms Morgan to give some thought to some maybe fleshing out that wording so it'd be crystal clear to future decision makers exactly the outcome that you were hoping a decision maker would arrive at.
Yes.
And very minor point, DEVP5, it just starts off with the words in assessing DEVP4. And I'm just wondering if that should say something like in assessing compliance with DEVP4. Policy 5 is just a sort of a thing that a decision maker should have regard to when they're looking at policy 4. So it's more about when you're checking compliance with that earlier policy, you have regard to these matters. So just give some thought to if there's some better wording at the start of that paragraph.
Certainly.
And then in clause A, the coinciding, compounding or cascading hazards. Again, it's a terminology I haven't come across in other plans that I'm familiar with. So coinciding is relatively straightforward. Compounding and or cascading hazards, what's the intent behind that?
Those were provisions that the hazards experts were looking at. So, it's probably something we need to think about again, some of the definitions around that, but some of the discussions again we had as to how some of these things are measured.
Yeah.
We sort of anticipated that we'd have to have a further discussion
Sure.
post getting some provisions to you.
Yeah, and maybe even in just a little bit more specificity, like what are the hazards here? We're dealing with flooding, we're dealing with potential liquefaction. It's outside the coastal inundation area, isn't it?
Yes,
So
lateral spread.
I think maybe just trying to be a little bit more specific, so a future decision maker would be crystal clear what was being intended. And very minor point, there's another DV4P4 under P5, so that just needs to become a 6. And then finally, Rule 1, matters of discretion G. I don't think we need G.
Sorry, that one was again.
Sorry?
Can you repeat that, please?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I wasn't talking to the microphone. Rule 1, do you see matter of discretion G? Ms Morgan, I don't think we need G.
Oh, yeah, no, we don't need that.
So, yeah, okay, just a minor point, we don't need G. But they were the only matters I had on the provisions themselves, otherwise they hung together pretty well.
Thank you.
And that was the end of my questions for you, Mr Holder and Ms Morgan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Brosnan?
No further questions, thank you.
Can I just clarify, I don't have any questions about the provisions, but I do have, in terms of the actual development plan that accompanies the provisions, and I'm just clarifying which plan it is that it will actually form that, because it's not been part of the provision set. So it's the outline development plan that came with your evidence for this? Just to clarify.
Yes, I need to check that. I'll go back and check that and make sure there's been different changes all the way through since we made the submission, and I just want to be sure before I give you an answer. I think it's
That we
something
have the
can come back
latest
on,
final
make
sort
sure
of
it's
development
the
plan.
correct one.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have until we see that. Yep. Good.
Great.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all we have for Riverbend.
Yeah.
Right, well, thank you very much for your experts, Mr. Winchester. And as I said before, I think the joint witnessing statement process, the expert conferencing statement, has assisted greatly to get to this point. So thank you.
Mr Chair, I'd just like to compliment the applicant on the comprehensive nature and robustness of the technical information that's been provided to us. In terms of a plan change proposal, I think it's very near the top of the end of comprehensiveness that I've seen come before us. So
Thank you.
obviously there's reasons for that in terms of the fast track stuff and everything that's gone before, but it is a very comprehensive suite of evidence. So I just wanted to compliment the applicant on that.
Thank you. It's been 5 years of work, really, I think, to get to this point. So,
6.
yeah, well, 6. Yeah, there you
Fast
go.
count.
More for some. Right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr Winchester.
Thank you, panel members.
Mr. Carew.
For the rest of the day.
At that point, we will take a morning tea break. Just to check my schedule. So we're due to have 20 minutes for morning tea break, so we'll resume at 10:50 this morning. So thank you very much, everyone. The hearing for Hearing Stream 6A is resumed after morning tea. And next submitter is Manu Ahuriri Trust, led by Mr. Gardner Hopkins initially. And what I'd like to do is just have some introductions generally in terms of the people, and then I'll hand over for a mihi, and then we'll get on with the sort of hearing process after that. Thank you, Mr. Gardner Hopkins.
Thank you to the chair. Look, I'll keep my introduction very, very brief. I have filed some representations, which I will talk to after we've done the introductions. I think probably it is best to hand over just for a short mihi, and then after that I'll ask the client representatives to each introduce themselves, and then I will talk very briefly to my representations. So if I can just hand over for the mihi.
Ko tēnā tātou, kāti rā, he mi ka tika kia koutou, he ngā kaiwhakahaere o tēnei kaupapa nō reira he mi kau atu ana kia koutou. Robert, e ne, e mihi nui kia koutou katoa. A tā huri au ki tō mātai tipuna no Tangaroa, ki te Māre Kura Pānia, te kaitiaki a more rātou ko te iwi Punaturi. Ko tēnei te reo mihi ki a rātou e tiaki ana te moana nei, te whanganui a o rotu, te whanga o rua wharo hoki. A takoto mai mauri a mai o tātou tini mate, ki ngā hunga, hoki ki te poho o hine nui te pō. Ki ngā pare kawa rātou kua whiturangi tia haere ki Hawaii nui, ki Hawaii roa, ki Hawaii Pāmama. Ka te wāho, rātou o te ao wairua, hoki ki a tātou o te ao kiko, tēnā tātou katoa. Anei mātou, ngā māngai o Mana Ahuriri, ki te whiti kōrero e pāna tēnei kaupapa whakahirehire e pāna tō mātou taonga tuku iho o te whanganui a o rotu. Anei mātou e mihi kau atu ana kia koutou nō reira. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. A brief thanks to you all for allowing us to present our important kaupapa here today in regards to te whanganui a o rotu, the Ahuriri estuary, and present our aspirations for our people moving forward. Just acknowledging our leaders here today and allowing us to speak. So, kia ora.
Kia ora.
I'll introduce myself while I'm up.
As well.
Ko ai au te tāo tōku whaia no te Waipounamu, ko Ngāti Iraki, Ngāti Māmoe Oku Hapu, ko Kaitahu Te Iwi. On my mother's side, she's from the South Island, a place called Little River. Ngai Tahu is my iwi on that side. I te tāo tōku papa, no ko Nate, so on my father's side, he's from here. Ngāti Pāro, Ngāti Henepari, Ngāti Tāwhao, me Ngāti Mahu Oku Hapu. So those hapu associated with our settlement group. Ko Te Kahaha Waikirangi tōku ingoa, or aka TK, and I have the privilege of holding the chairperson role for Mana Ahuriri. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
We'll go over this.
O morena koutou, ko Mike Pōhio tōku ingoa, ko Ngāi Tahu me Ngāti Pikiao me Ngāti Kahenunu ngā iwi. So my name is Mike Pōhio. My father was from here, my father's mother's side from Te Arawa, and going back 4 generations to Ngāi Tahu. My mother was English, so that coming together brought me into this state of being a part of Mana Ahuriri through my father, and invited to and successful to undertake the role as chair of Mana Ahuriri Holdings. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
O morena tātou, tautoko te mihi ki a koutou, ia tātou nei kaupapa tēnei rā. Ko ai au, i uri o rākai pāka tēnei, e noho ana i waingi te whānau Ngāti Pōporo, i mahi ana ki nei ki Ahuriri. My name is Paris Greening, and I say my bones are from up Nuhaka way. I live in the centre of my universe, south of Hastings, in a place called Bridgepark. But I have the privilege of serving our whānau here in Ahuriri as the General Manager of Mana Ahuriri Trust. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Morena koutou. So I don't intend to really talk through my representations. that they were relatively brief in any event and really just a little bit of a scene setter and a bit of a roadmap for the intended order of witnesses. I think, as has been acknowledged at the outset of the hearing, the issues have narrowed considerably through the evidence exchange and the joint witness conferencing. And so it doesn't seem to me as if we're actually very far apart from council officers in most respects. Possibly just two things for me to talk to. And the first is in terms of the area of potential ecological significance. I think we've heard from the council's expert ecologist this morning that there is agreement that it is not qualifying as an SIVH. And so clearly progress in terms of an understanding to that extent. The outstanding issue is whether or not it does qualify or should qualify as a restoration area. And you'll hear from the submitter's expert, Treff Barnett, and my understanding is that she is comfortable with it not being identified as a restoration area in terms of, I guess, a matter of fact and assessment against the relevant criteria. I raise the other dimension in terms of, from a planning perspective, even if it might just tip into what could qualify as a restoration area, whether it is appropriate in these circumstances to identify it as one. And I say that because of the known development aspirations of Mana Ahuriri and the competing, if you like, policy considerations around that land being redress land and the need to enable appropriate economic use of that land for the hapu. And I guess in reliance on I guess, this position, I do refer, and it's not in my representations, but to the Supreme Court decision in Port Otago. And as I understand it, in a nutshell, the Supreme Court's really in that decision was saying if there is known conflict or tension between different values at the plan development stage, then wherever possible, they should be resolved at the plan development stage and not just pushed off to the resource consent stage. And so I think we heard from the council's ecologist that in terms of the effects and mitigation hierarchy pathway, offsetting would probably be available. And I guess I take the view, well, let's front foot that now and anticipate that there will be offset mitigation, identify that requirement in the planning instrument, and set the right expectation. Because I guess, very simply, why identify a restoration area in the plan if there is no intention to restore that area? And I think from an ecological perspective, it is accepted. It's a small area that is isolated, and for those reasons almost alone, as a long-term restoration project, it's not particularly attractive. The planning mechanism is not yet, I guess, drafted, but we have the bones in place in the sense of we have the Severn development area that is now on the table, and that currently deals with a number of, if you like, additional matters for consideration or consenting requirements in terms of traffic and visual amenity, sort of urban design. And the intention is to develop an additional consent trigger through that overlay, through that development area, that requires mitigation in terms of offset for the loss of that ecological area, and to achieve no net loss. The intention is to have that as a restricted discretionary activity, but to have a clear standard to be achieved of no net loss, and if that standard is not achieved, for the activity to be non-complying. And so quite a clear direction in terms of the outcome that is to be anticipated. And look, that's consistent with what Mana Ahuriri has said consistently. It wants to do the right thing here, and its advice, certainly from an ecological perspective, is that the offsetting, the creation of an additional habitat area that is connected to a wider existing ecological habitat will be overall a better outcome at the end of the day. So look, you may have some questions for the ecologist on that, and Mr. Holder, the planner, just in terms of that mechanism, but that was one thing I just wished to flag at the outset in terms of outstanding issues. The other that I think I saw come through as a question in the evidence, or perhaps the joint witness statement, was the question of esplanade reserves associated with what, at least in some of the documentation, is called Saltwater Creek on part of the site. And I guess my response to that is twofold. There are two opportunities, at least, to address what is appropriate in terms of any esplanade type reserve or function. And the first is with the formal divestment from the Crown of that land, marginal strip requirements operate. And so there is, in that context, a discussion that needs to be had with the Crown and the Department of Conservation as to what extent a marginal strip may or may not apply. And that may well resolve the issue of an appropriate setback for ecological access and other purposes. If a marginal strip isn't imposed, then at the resource consent subdivision stage, esplanade reserve requirements will be a matter for consideration. And so really the position is that through either of those two possible processes, the extent of any marginal or esplanade reserve will be addressed then. And so that's not something that needs to be inbuilt into the plan at this stage. And so really those were the two matters that I just wished to flag to the panel at the outset. I'm happy to take any questions, but otherwise we'll move to the witnesses.
Okay, thank you. Can I just clarify the intention? So I was looking at Mr. Brewer's plan, which shows an area of proposed restoration wetlands, and which raised the question of the whole zoning of that sort of strip between the railway line and the expressway and things. So can you just clarify what the intention of that restoration planting is? That it's purely there for offset purposes, or it is there for a longer term, just overall gain in ecology values?
Yes, so it's probably fair to say it's principally identified for the offset, but there is a general commitment to ensuring that if you like, not necessarily formal reserve status, but that reserve area is well looked after and maintained into the future. And I suppose just pausing on that, there was, I think, mention or a question in, I think, the 42A report as to whether that was intended to vest as a reserve in council. And the position on that is a subsequent discussion to be had with council, and that will arise at the time of any subdivision. It's not clear to us whether the council necessarily wants to have it as reserve. There's obviously the issue that as essentially redress land, there is some hesitation from Mana Ahuriri in terms of handing it back to somebody else. And so, yeah, look, that is a matter for future discussion in terms of how that is best cared for want of a better phrase.
And the zoning of the land, which is rural productive
Yes,
at the moment?
Yes, it is at the moment.
Yeah, and that's proposed to be left like
Yes.
that? Yeah, okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Garden-Hopkins?
Just in terms of that, what you've just been discussing, the potential offset wetland, which would be within the property at 301 Previnson Drive, just confirming from my understanding, so that's part of the redress package, that it'll come back to Mana Ahuriri's ownership?
Yes, it is.
Okay. No, that was all.
Questions? Just turning to the point I made in terms of that triangle of land at the roundabout with State Highway 2.
Yes.
As far as I know, we don't have any evidence in terms of assessing the traffic effects, for instance, or urban design issues relating to the development of that land. Could you address that point, that question for me?
And look, I think it's fair to say that there isn't specific evidence in terms of that corner. And it hasn't been a focal point, but I understand that there is some existing use and development on that corner already. And my understanding in respect of both traffic and any urban design matters is that either the existing high traffic generating rule that is currently proposed in the plan will be triggered for any substantive redevelopment of that site, even if it is industrial rather than large format, which has been the focus for most of the attention. But also the Severn development area overlay is intended to apply to that site as well as the large format area. And so the additional controls or triggers, both in terms of traffic and assessment matters and in terms of visual amenity and therefore urban design, will apply to future development of that site. So if you like, that's the safety net, that although there hasn't been a detailed assessment of that site in particular in evidence before you, it is captured by the planning mechanism of the development area overlay and so will be assessed appropriately in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No, thank you.
Thank you. So look, the intended batting order was to kick off with the cultural witnesses, who you've all heard introduce themselves not that long ago. They've each produced, obviously, written statements. It's probably fair to say a large focus of those statements has been on Ahuriri Station rather than Severn Street. But certainly, as I understand it, Severn Street, in terms of its history, was very much part of the estuarine environment historically, and so there is that relationship with Ahuriri Station. And in terms of the development aspirations for Mana Ahuriri, Severn Street is intimately linked with Ahuriri Station, particularly because it is a short-term, real opportunity to develop, and of course then get some return in terms of the investment and effort, which can then be put towards the longer-term development of Ahuriri Station, which you'll appreciate is a significant exercise, and the mechanics that work together. Plus, of course, you will have seen in the economic evidence some of the, if you like, displacement of industrial land from Severn is intended to be, if you like, replaced at Ahuriri Station. So there's some synergies at the very least. But look, as I say, there's detailed evidence that's been tabled. The witnesses don't have summary statements, but what I will just do is invite each to talk briefly, I guess, to their evidence, but with a focus on Severn. And if they have to sit here and come back and talk to you about Ahuriri Station in a little more detail, I think that was the indicated preference in terms of just how we deal with these two sites, because they are obviously specific rezoning requests. So if that sounds like a plan,
Sounds like a plan, yep.
then I will hand over first to Kaha.
Well, kia ora anō koutou. So we have the privilege of representing the 7 hapu of Ahuriri as a PSG, post-settlement entity, established under our 2021 Settlement Act, of which we settled in 2022. That settlement acknowledged the severe loss of land and the cultural and economic harm caused by the Crown's breach of Te Tiri Te Waitangi. At the heart of our identity is Te Whanganui Aorotu, the Ahuriri Estuary. Once a vast and vibrant environment, it has been greatly reduced and altered, yet it remains central to our history, our well-being, and our identity. Both Severn Street and Ahuriri Station are part of these ancestral landscapes. Through our settlement, we have the Te Muriwai o Te Whanga plan, which we've developed over the last 2 to 3 years. This is a statutory plan that protects and enhances the environmental, cultural, social, and economic values of Te Muriwai o Te Whanga o Te Whanganui Aorotu. It is built on 5 cultural values and 6 strategic pou, with clear environmental indicators and development goals. Ahuriri Station and Severn Street lies within those boundaries, so the development must align with this vision. I guess what that means is that links into the area that we've identified for mitigation, for offset, to provide enhancement, an overall Māori enhancement for this area. And it's based on this strategic plan and the expectation of our whānau that we leave our whenua no worse off. That we're providing a better outcome for our taiao as kaitiaki when we enter into these developments. As you may know, the history of, or the position that we are with Ahuriri, as Mana Ahuriri as a settlement group, is that we've got a lot of opportunity to purchase whenua within Ahuriri, which was provided for us through our settlement. We don't have a big quantum of coin. The expectation from our whānau is that we get all of that land back. And so now we're in a position where we have to juggle our responsibilities of kaitiakitanga, but also returning this land to our title and developing it in a way that's going to be economically sustainable for the future. Those are the balls that we're juggling. But Te Muriwa o Te Whanga lays that foundation for us, lays that expectation that we're going to do the right thing, that if there is areas that we can't avoid for in regards to potential wetland areas, that we will provide areas that are significantly better off as a part of our developments. So, Quera, I think, yeah, I'll leave it there, but yeah, kia ora koutou.
Kia ora. Any questions?
No questions, but I found your evidence particularly helpful. It was very illuminating for me for you to outline the background to the Te Muriwai plan, which you mentioned earlier, which I found very interesting, and also appreciated your evidence where you set out the benefit to Mana Ahuriri of the ASDA, the Ahuriri Station Development Area, which you addressed. So just no questions, but found that evidence very helpful. Thank you.
Good. Questions?
Yeah, no further questions from me either. I found it particularly helpful how you just spoke about the weighting of your responsibilities in regards to sustainable economic development, along with your aspirations, obviously, to be kaitiaki in regards particular to this piece of whenua at Severn Street with regard to those ecological aspirations there. So thank you, that was helpful for me.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we could just invite Paris to speak briefly to his evidence and answer any questions.
Kia ora tata anō. Mana tangata, mana whenua, mana moana, mana ahuriri. That's a pathway and a vision and how we should be. There's whenua and moana in there. And that's an indication that mana ahuriri take very, very high level of ownership on their role and responsibility as kaitiaki over the whenua and the moana and the waterways that sit on our whenua. We also have a high responsible level to our people, mana tangata. That there is who mana ahuriri is. We're environmentalists, we are there to support our people, and in order to do that, we need to have an economic base. We've got a whakatauki, and I'll shorten it down to, it goes, ko rua te pae ko te whanga. He kāinga to te ata, he kāinga ka awatea, he kāinga ka ahiahi. And what that translates loosely is, it's the storehouse that never closes is the whanga, the Ahuriri estuary. A kai in the morning, a kai in the afternoon, and a kai in the evening. That was literally what the whanga meant to us. Today, we cannot do that. In order for us to feed our people today, we need to feed them culturally, spiritually, environmentally, and economically. That's all I'd like to summarise my submission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Look, again, no questions, but I found your evidence really helpful, particularly the way you talked about the degraded Māori of the estuary and how you saw from Mana Ahuriri's perspective that could be addressed or restored, but occurring alongside commercial and other development, which I found quite an interesting approach. It's not an approach that I always see around the country when we're hearing from iwi groups, but yeah, I found it very interesting and helpful in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Paris.
And kia ora for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'll invite Mike to speak briefly to his evidence. I guess one thing I would add, and it is in his written statement, and I would invite the panel, if necessary, to have a look at it, but at his extensive experience in terms of commercial and culturally appropriate development. And I know last time when he appeared, he spoke about the Ruakura development, but his experience is far beyond that. And I think it is just relevant to acknowledge that he brings that to the table, and as part of this team has, been very influential.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to present to you on Ahuriri Station and Severn Precinct. Rather than talk to the submission, there's just a couple of overview points. I'd like to start by acknowledging those who have gone before, and that includes the tens of generations, and including more recently those that have enabled the settlement it's important that we acknowledge the point that we're at now of breathing life back into the settlement. I want to acknowledge the experts and council for much has been achieved, and we're thankful for the submission of that statement that we are dealing more with smaller issues than the more substantive ones. So we're thankful for all of that work and the way in which the teams have come together. Some contextual things here. So my role as chair of Mana Ahuriri Holdings, just to reinforce that we have a portfolio, and so there are multiple parts to what it is that we need to achieve, and specifically in relation to the properties that are within the settlement. To add to what Te Kaha has said, there's a sequencing that we need to go through, there's a prioritisation that we need to go through, and we're time-bound. So I'm not sure if it's known, but within the settlement there is a certain defined period in which we are obligated to acquire these properties. So we have to do the best that we can within a defined time frame. So part of that, thankful for our experts, is to demonstrate that we will fulfil all of our obligations to the best we can within the time frames, and that's obviously something that you deal with. But in our case, as Te Kaha said, we have limited resource. Again, just an overview. In my statement, I referred to the cultural well-being and economic well-being as objectives. Of course, there's the environmental well-being. One without the other or others leaves us all in a detrimental or unsustainable state. And to reinforce, it's our very clear intention and in our submission is fundamentally to achieve all of those well-beings. That's all I wanted to say in terms of setting the context. Nothing specific on Severn other than it's sitting within a portfolio and within a timeline in which we are obligated to acquire. And if we miss that timeline, then we will underachieve on what has been hard fought over many, many years.
Kia ora for that. And I'd also like to acknowledge there's a considerable amount of work that's been done in probably less than 6 months, really, from ground zero to where we are at the moment. So I just want to acknowledge that on behalf of the officers as well as your advisors. So thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Well, we can now move to the experts, and the first in terms of my batting order is Natalie Hampson. We, for some of the experts, have short summary statements. Not for all of them. Some will just talk to their evidence.
Fine.
No questions for Mike?
And so just whilst Natalie's getting settled, I do have some hard copies, and they can be emailed through after presentation.
Yeah.
Mr. Gardner-Hopkins, I just had a quick question of Mike, if that was all right.
yes,
Sorry, we
of
skipped
course.
over. That's all right. Just considering the phasing and the interlinked nature of Severn Street and Ahuriri Station, especially, in Mr. Gardner-Hopkins' opening statement, I was just wondering if you could clarify for me. In your evidence, you referenced the relocation of displaced industrial activities from one to the other. And I just wonder if you had any comment, if you could clarify that, particularly how that certainty of timing in relation to the rezoning and its importance.
In terms of timing, securing the consent enables us to go to market. And when we go to market, it's like standing at a conveyor belt. We can only look at those that are on the conveyor belt at that time. So we can only stand up to that conveyor belt once we've got consent and certainty. So it's not possible for me to say what the time frame is for displacement, because we are both consent-wise constrained and market constrained. And of course, for those in the market, they're looking for particular attributes, and Severn Street may suit some players versus Ahuriri Station. So I'm sorry,
I'm just wondering if you see there to be a risk of, I think you talk about displaced businesses having a viable alternative site to go to and the interlinked nature of your two potential developments there. Is there a risk that materialises?
I don't think there's a risk.
Okay.
I don't think there's a risk because we have experience in being able to deal with developments as best, and so we remain flexible to be able to manage that risk.
Thank you, that's helpful. Yeah.
If I could perhaps add, and it may be that Natalie or Matthew can also add to that question, but as I understand it, the existing industrial uses are not particularly intensive. And so in terms of displacement, it's probably, from a planning perspective, more about the future opportunities and so for future industrial activities that might wish to locate in that area, if that opportunity at Severn is not available because the intention is to have it for large format, then that opportunity becomes available at Ahuriri Station.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was useful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hams?
Natalie?
I've got a summary statement, but I thought I might try and abbreviate it further
Okay.
in the interest of time. So my primary evidence focuses first on the proposed large format retail zone expansion. So the large format retail zone plays a key role in providing for consolidated growth of large format retail, particularly at the larger end of the store size scale. It serves a total Napier catchment from a strategic and accessible location, and while there is vacant capacity in the large format retail zone, largely at 51 Severn Street, demand for large format retail is expected to exceed the capacity of the existing zone and continue over the long term. Mr. McElraith for the council and I agree that there is a need to zone additional capacity for large format retail in Napier. So the further 20.4 hectares of large format retail zone secures Severn Precinct as a single strategic location for large-scale, large format retail growth over the medium and the long term. And in terms of Policy 8 of the NPSUD, I believe it meets the test of significance. I have considered distributional retail effects on the centre network from the expansion. I conclude, and Mr. McElraith agrees, that the distributional effects are unlikely and are already managed effectively by the provisions of the large format retail zone. Overall, there are a range of economic benefits of the proposed expansion and limited opportunity costs which I consider can be mitigated. So my primary evidence then turns to the proposed general industrial zone on the corner site by the roundabout and assesses the impact or opportunity costs of rezoning existing and vacant land notified as GIZ as large format retail zone. So that's 90 Prebison Drive and 58 Severn Precinct, Severn Street, sorry. I consider the proposed corner site a suitable substitute in terms of scale and location for the loss of industrial capacity at 90 Prebison Drive. And just to continue on that point that you've just raised, it appears now that the existing businesses operating from 90 Prebison Drive may not need to be relocated if redevelopment is initiated and may potentially leave in the near term when the land ownership changes. So in my rebuttal, I updated my position on that matter, specifically that no mechanisms are needed to manage effects on those businesses. Accounting for the offset area of the corner by the roundabout, the total reduction in notified general industrial zone from Mana Ahuriri's proposal was estimated at 10.3 hectares. While there is an opportunity cost for industrial growth in Pandora, Mr. McElraith and I agree that this would not create any insufficiency of industrial capacity in the medium term, and when combined with Mana Ahuriri's proposed airport business precinct Area A, industrial capacity in the PDP could increase by a net 5.7 hectares at the district level. There are no economic matters of disagreement on the efficiency of Mana Ahuriri's proposed GIZ in the Severn precinct. The Section 42A officer identified that an assessment under 3.61 of the NPS HPL was required. I addressed this in my rebuttal evidence. I agreed that it is agreed that there is insufficiency of zoned large format retail and industrial capacity in the long term in Napier. Insufficiency, therefore, is the first test under 3.61. In terms of practical and feasible alternatives, the second test of 3.61, the benefits of consolidating large format retail growth mean that Severn Street is the best option, and alternate locations of general industrial zone or other zoned industrial capacity. They include the airport zone, Awatoto and Ahuriri Station, in my view. I have not provided a comparative assessment of those other industrial locations, although I understand they have been heard through the hearing process. I have, however, set out a number of reasons why the corner site by the roundabout is both practicable and feasible, and based on those factors, I consider that the alternatives test is more than likely satisfied. Lastly, there are no disagreements that the economic benefits of the large format retail zone and general industrial zone rezoning in the Severn precinct outweigh the opportunity costs of foregone land-based primary production on the sites, and that the third test of 3.61 is therefore met. Overall, I consider that Mana Ahuriri's relief of the Severn precinct as modified for this hearing is the most efficient zoning of the respective sites and can be supported from an economic perspective.
Okay, thank you very much for that summary. Just a couple of quick questions for me. You say in paragraph 2 that it serves a total Napier catchment. Is that confined to Napier City, or is that wider than just Napier City?
I think because Hastings District also has large format retail provision and zoning, that we really are primarily, it's focused on serving the needs of Napier residents. Obviously, there'll be people from Hastings and outside of the district coming to shop here as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. And in terms of the capacity issue and whether there's sufficient or not sufficient, from a market economics viewpoint, is it preferable to have a somewhat oversupply of zoned land rather than a undersupply or a just supply kind of scenario?
I think the NPSUD has now made it very clear that an oversupply is more efficient. And I guess in the past, before the NPSUD or UDC came along, there was a lot of discourse around the inefficiencies of zoning too much land, but I think that discussion has changed, and now the benefits of overzoning outweigh any costs, and that's a clear message from central government and policy direction. So, no, there's certainly, we're required to zone at least, and Policy 8 requires significant additions to be given consideration, so I think more is more.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any questions for Ms Hampson?
No, very clear rebuttal evidence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one matter in your rebuttal evidence, in your paragraph 27. So it's just, you say there in the last sentence, whether the first test of clause 3.61 is satisfied with respect, depends whether weight is given to a medium or long-term insufficiency. Would it be appropriate for us to place more weight on the long-term matters?
Certainly, I think that's been the position of Ms Morgan, that it's up to the council to decide which time frame is given more weight. I had, I guess, traditionally felt that medium term was the right test because only in the medium term is a zoning response required, and that had been my thinking. But certainly councils do need to provide for capacity in the long term, and that can be zoned or identified in an FDS. And as I said before, zoning does provide a number of benefits over just identifying it because it provides that certainty. And that's particularly important in this case because, as has been explained, having that certainty of zoning has got significant implications as to how Mana Ahuriri can plan and invest and move forward with their plans. So I think long-term is appropriate in this context.
Okay. And just summarise again the reason for that, why the long term is appropriate. You're talking quite fast and I can't write that.
Oh, sorry. Councils do have a choice. I think in this case, because it's Mana Ahuriri's redress land,
Yeah.
long-term is appropriate because zoning it now in the PDP will provide the certainty they need
Okay.
to plan.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. Mr. Gardner-Hopkins?
No, nothing arising, so happy to move to the next expert. Treff Barnett. And again, I have a short hand up to circulate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. I'm
Good morning.
guessing or presuming you're going to take the following or the previous witnesses a process of summarising key points.
Yeah.
I'm particularly interested in what you've heard today in terms of from Mr. Kessels. That would be good to know. Thank you.
Okay. So,
Just talk, if you could talk to your summary.
okay,
That'd be
I will
great.
do that.
Pretty short.
I was going to start at number 4, but I'll just I'll shorten that up as well. So, as we've heard, that the wetlands hydrologically disconnected from the nearby coastal habitats, and most of the inflow is via the stormwater drainage system from the adjacent industrial area. So the water quality is poor. It's got high nutrient levels and visible algal growth, which, combined with the pest pressures, makes the site unsuitable for supporting threatened bird species beyond transient visits. I assess the overall ecological value of the site to be low, and of all the saline wetland habitats we surveyed in the Ahuriri area, this was the most degraded, with the least potential. Skipping over and just addressing the potential, the SNA reports that were done by Waikato University identified the site as having low potential for ecological restoration. So when ranked, they had a ranking from 1 to 7, and this was sitting at 2, with 7 being excellent potential and 1 being no potential. So this was just like one step above that. So that survey saw the site as having very low potential. The habitat type is not rare in the district, and then similar high-quality saline plains cover almost 600 hectares of the surrounding landscape. The one at-risk species that we found in there, it's naturally uncommon, which just means that locally it can be very common, and that's the case that we have here, which is a little native musk, which is just a tiny little herb, and this is really easily propagated as addressed in my rebuttal evidence. I maintain that the Severn Street saline wetland is not a suitable SIVH candidate for the reasons outlined before. It's degraded, isolated, lacks meaningful connectivity or restoration potential compared to other saline habitats around. And following conferencing, when I considered whether the site would be suitable as a restoration area, the definition of the restoration area is for an area that has significant indigenous vegetation with significant ecological value at a local and city-wide scale and suitable for restoration. And I don't believe this site offers that, given its isolation, poor water quality, industrial stormwater inputs, and limited connectivity. And that if you are looking at a restoration site, resources would be better directed to sites with stronger ecological potential. And regarding the offset area, this is not here, but there was some discussion from Mr. Kessels about that. So in terms of success of areas like this, I've worked on restoration projects like this in saline habitats for Auckland International Airport, and they have been really successful. The difference with saline habitats is that as soon as you get saltwater inundation, the vegetation changes immediately. Terrestrial vegetation cannot live in a salty environment, and it's overtaken by a suite of saline plants, which in this case is dominantly the Juncus species, and you can see that in every single drain in every single area around the Ahuriri area. So it establishes very well. And the growing something or re-establishing the little native herb species, there's a number of little native herb species that we have around here. They sit at a very clear demarcation line between the top of Mean High Water Springs and the terrestrial line. They're in this like nice little zone, and again, it's just getting that zone right, and they establish very easily and very well. So I have high confidence that the restoration site as proposed would work.
Okay, all right. Can I just clarify before I turn to questions? So Mr. Brewer's plan shows an area of what's called restoration wetlands, but that, just to clarify, that's the area on the south side of the fence dividing what we've been talking about, whether it's an SIVH or not, versus paddock, basically, sort of an open area of paddock to the south. Is that correct? The restoration,
No,
we're just looking at the map? If you could point, Ben, if you could just drag it up slightly and zoom in.
Restoration
is up there.
Yeah, when does that start? Because there's a fence that crosses over, and I'm guessing that's the edge of it.
You've got the saline habitat all the way through here,
Yep,
and then it reverts to paddock.
yep, with a fence in between, yep.
And so the idea with the proposal is that saline habitat is then increased in here in this area that was likely, I need to check, but is likely reclamation would be,
Reclamation, yep.
and then that area would be returned back to the harbour.
So,
So that you've got the continuity of the salt water moving in and out.
okay,
And would probably come down to this level.
yeah. So no, we are clear then.
Yeah.
So in order to restore that area south of what I call the fence line, which is now paddock,
Which area?
grass
Oh,
area, yeah, that area, yep, it would have to be declaimed, basically, remove
Parts
Slowly?
of it does not to a great, it's actually
quite low.
yeah, the levels are, depends on how high this level is, but the levels, the adjustment that you have to do is quite subtle.
Right,
So it can be created by a series of drainage channels and then just like shallow contouring through, and that gets you that nice diversity of vegetation, which creates that indigenous biodiversity that's got some variation in it. The proposal was also to have additional vegetation alongside buffering, which then provides habitat for some of the other species like fernbird and bittern and the other at-risk species that don't inhabit right in the middle of the salt marsh.
so the other issues you identify includes industrial stormwater inputs
Yeah.
and poor water quality. So what would have to be done to address those
And the Severn Street site or in the restoration site?
in the
proposed
restoration side?
The restoration site is connected. The Severn Street site is not. So the restoration site would have the natural inflow and it would be influenced by the tidal flow because this is all tidal through here. So that would go up and down. It would be constantly flushing, and then you would have that connection that area does not have any untreated stormwater inputs.
Okay.
And part of the restoration would be to ensure that it wouldn't.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the panel?
Look, the only question I wanted to put to you was the one I put to Mr. Kessels this morning, but you've answered that in the last paragraph of your summary statement, so I don't need to address that to you. But just to let you know, I found your evidence interesting and helpful, and particularly with your primary evidence, you attached the proof of concept wetland planting plan, which refers to the restoration area that we're discussing at the moment, doesn't it? So I appreciated the detail that was set out in there in terms of proving that it is a viable proposition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, thank you. Similarly, I found your rebuttal evidence particularly helpful, and I think the comments you've made here, so I just want to clarify. So your evidence is that you have a high level of confidence that the proposed offset area can support the restoration, that similar saline species are present nearby, and that the threatened native musk can survive given its habitat requirements in that proposed location.
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barnett.
Thank you. On to traffic. Mark Georgeson.
Thanks.
So the summary statement that's just been handed up does have two parts. The first part deals with Severn, the second with Ahuriri Station. I think he's got 6 or 7 paragraphs in his summary. Whether he needs to summarise the summary, I'll leave up to Mark to decide.
Let him read it.
Yeah, well, short enough for you to read the full thing, if you want.
I'm in your hands, so I'll do that.
Probably easiest.
My evidence draws from extensive scenario testing undertaken using various traffic modelling suites. The evidence shows that a range of transport infrastructure changes may be needed in response to progressive development of the precinct, depending on type, staging and timing of development, and other upgrades that may be advanced by road and controlling authorities. These scenarios are presented by way of examples, not absolute development forms, and it is proper that the transport needs and effects of future developments are addressed at the time they're proposed. The Vehicle Trip Generation Rule TPTR5 and Standard TPTS7 of district-wide matters of the proposed plan are the appropriate mechanisms for requiring assessment of transport and safety impacts, including cumulative effects. That standard requires an integrated transport assessment for developments exceeding a trip rate of 400 light vehicle movements or 50 heavy vehicle movements per day. In my experience of large format retail centres, this rule will be triggered collectively or individually by development stages. And I include examples there of a large format furniture retailer. That kind of store might generate 1,500 vehicle movements a day, and a home improvement store probably the order of 2,000 or 2,500 vehicle movements a day. My next paragraph then refers to added controls in managing transport impacts within the Severn precinct. And I describe those as being under Rule SVPR3. Now, since I wrote this statement, there's been further drafting and so on of those provisions, and the relevant reference now is DFX and assessment criteria AC3. My next paragraph, I reference TPTR2, and this is probably the more relevant rule in my mind as well. That rule relates to any new or modified vehicle accesses onto a state highway, and Prebinson Drive being one of those, where there are a number of matters of discretion in relation to triggering that rule, including approvals from NZTA. So that rule is and the assessment criteria around safe and efficient functioning of the accesses, the impacts onto the adjoining roads, and the related approvals becomes triggered for each new or modified vehicle access to a development. So that would, in my view, be triggered earlier than the vehicle trip generation rule, which is only triggered when the 400 vehicle movements a day is triggered. And I conclude by saying that I'm satisfied that the proposed rezoning for the Severn precinct can be delivered from a transport perspective, and I confirm that both NZTA and NCC are accepting of the above approaches. Maybe just adding to the commentary before too about the corner site on State Highway 2 and Prebinson Drive. There was some discussion around the vehicle trip generation rule being triggered for that if the vehicle movements are above those thresholds. Again, for that site, the TPTR2 rule relating to vehicle access would be an immediate trigger for assessment criteria, irrespective of whether that vehicle generation threshold is triggered. And both being state highway frontages, NZTA would be a consulted and an approval party for those accesses.
Okay, could you just repeat that rule number that you were saying,
TPTR2 is the rule that relates to new or modified vehicle access onto state highways and arterial roads.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but from your professional view, that corner site has no glaring or obvious kind of limitations from a traffic access point?
I think the simplicity of the corner site likely lends itself to a left-in configuration, left-out configuration because of the way in which the existing roundabout on that corner is formed and islands that lead to and from the roundabout.
Because there is a concrete median through that area of Prebinson Drive. Yeah, if you could scroll down a little bit, Ben. Could you scroll Matt down a bit? Yeah, there.
So there are islands that extend along these. Prebinson Drive has got a full separated island.
Yeah.
Extends along State Highway 2. That would naturally lend to simplicity of access arrangements being, left in, left out configurations.
Okay. And using the two roundabouts on either end of Prebinson Drive to make other manoeuvres if you need to.
If you need to.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, thank you. Any questions from the panel?
No.
No?
Just one. So just to clarify, based on that queue modelling that you've done between Prebinson Drive roundabout and the proposed development access roundabout, just confirming your view is that Severn Street will continue to operate safely under proposed peak traffic conditions, including the increased heavy vehicle movements from the way station and the nearby industrial activities? That's your view?
Yes, in terms of the example scenarios that we've tested, but bearing in mind that there's a further level of assessment and so on needed at resource consent stage,
of course,
where those matters will be revisited again.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I have no further questions. Good.
Thank you. Now, the next on my list is Johan.
Yes.
And I don't think we have a summary statement to hand up, but I will just invite Johan to make a few comments just in terms of where things have ended up from his perspective.
Good morning.
Ms. Ehlers?
On Severn, my involvement is around earthworks design to shape the site so that it will drain and that the ground levels will be high enough to accommodate the expected relative changes in sea levels. My involvement also is around servicing on water supply and wastewater. So to the first instance, the stormwater drainage and inundation matters. The site, the Severn Street site, the main 51 and 58 Severn, at the moment drains northwards and to the west to Pandora. Pandora is quite low-lying. Its stormwater system is already under capacity. It discharges through the Thames Street drain into the estuary. Parts of it already becomes inundated during storm tides, during really high tides. So we cannot drain in that direction. We have to drain to the old Tutaikuri. The old Tutaikuri is tidal. It is a gravity discharge through the tidal gates at the expressway bridge. This discharge into Ahuriri estuary. That means that the old Tutaikuri is also subject to differential movement in sea levels. And on top of that, the old Tutaikuri receives pumped stormwater discharges from Georges Drive Pump Station, Plantation, Old County, New County, adding up to 16,000 litres per second when those pump stations get going. The old Tutaikuri on the gravity discharge side also has residential and commercial developments. And some of them sit down at RL2, RL2.5. The large format retail sites on the southern side of Premierson Drive, most of those floors sit at RL 3.2. I don't know how closely those people actually looked at all these matters when those floor levels were set, but it turns out that those floor levels are perfect for the long-term effects we need to consider. It's definitely, there's a very high degree of confidence that we would be able to retain 500 mils freeboard over a 50-year period at a floor level of 3.2, and then we may or may not be okay in over a 100-year time frame. That's in a nutshell. So the proposed earthworks that we've shown at concept level is aimed at draining towards the old Tutaikuri from those sites. The same factors apply to the other sites. As far as wastewater disposal goes, the area is serviced, and we may need to do an upgrade to the existing wastewater pump station on Premierson Drive, but that's all pretty small fry in the context. And water supply, the area is serviced. The only matter to be aware of is that for water for firefighting purposes, that the water supply system is designed for a FW2 level of protection, which translates to 25 litres per second. And for industrial sites and commercial sites that are not sprinklered, one would need more than that. The sprinklers themselves would need more than that. So some on-site designs would be required for firefighting, but those are matters that can be addressed at building consent stage for each individual development. So in a nutshell, that's where servicing for Severn Street sits.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ellis. Any questions?
Look, just one very minor trivial question from your rebuttal evidence at your paragraph 35. Really just to correct.
35.
Yeah, the very last paragraph of your rebuttal statement.
This is on Severn.
It's dated the 7th of August.
I found it.
Yeah, so paragraph 35, second line, RL 13.2, or do you mean 3.2?
Oh, sorry. Yes, you're correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That was all
Yeah,
I wanted.
3.2. 13.2 would be pretty high up.
Other than that, no questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions, Commissioner Brosnan?
Yeah, thank you. No further questions for me.
Thank you.
Johan.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you. We can keep moving. Richard Ryan Hamill. And we do have a 3/4 page hand up.
Yeah.
Welcome. Ryan Hamill.
Thank you. Before I go through the summary of evidence, I'd like to probably talk about two terms, proportionate risk and cascading hazards, that sort of frame up my evidence, and obviously there's interest from the chair. So proportionate risk is the process of managing the potential impacts that is appropriate for the level of risk involved. So risk being a function of the likelihood and the consequence. What this is saying is it depends on the consequence to how you consider the hazard and the net level of risk. An example of this is having a low tolerance for hazard exposure for the residential developments, but a higher level of tolerance for the commercial area in Ahuriri, because for residential developments, typically seen as sensitive activities, you want to take a more precautionary approach than an area where there's no people sleeping overnight, and that level of risk can be lower. So that just as a high-level view of proportionate risk. Now, cascading hazards are where one hazard triggers or exacerbates another hazard. So an example of this is groundwater levels that could increase with sea level rise, reducing stormwater storage in low-lying areas. So it's having a think about, are there one hazard trigger that could have an impact on another, and have we thought about those consequences in our assessments? And to be clear, we certainly have for Severn and Ahuriri. So starting from my statement of evidence, my evidence addresses the coastal hazards of inundation, erosion, groundwater and tsunami, and considering relevant sections of the RMA, NZCPS and RCEP, as well as the coastal hazard and climate change guidance for local government from the Ministry of the Environment. I note that the existing development actually is not currently susceptible to coastal erosion or inundation, but will be susceptible in future with sea level rise. And so raising of the land was considered as an appropriate method, and this was acknowledged by the council reviewer, Mr. Bayer, as a preferred action if protecting from coastal inundation. And I applied the what's called the interim precautionary relative sea level rise allowances for coastal planning and policy from the MFE guidance. And the reason I did this is the higher test, or the highest test currently in the guidance for sea level rise establishment and considering inundation. And this included my conservative assessment of the 1% AEP coastal inundation level and the use of the 83rd percentile of sea level rise for the high emission scenario of SSP 58.5, as well as the effect of vertical land movement. And if I could add, including uncertainty after movement, please. And that's important because the vertical land movement has a high level of uncertainty that has been factored in to the projection of that factor into the future, and over time increases quite significantly. Due to the proposed development being for commercial, I considered a finished floor level for the retail development of 3.2 to be appropriate. If you could delete those 3 words after appropriate, please.
Yeah.
This level still provides an 0.35 metre freeboard for the finished floor level for the commercial development for the SSP 8.5 medium-term projection at 2130, although some inundation of the parking and access areas is possible due to their levels varying from 2.4 to 3 metres. I used the latest available information for tsunami effects that GNS provided the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and looking at this information, the proposed minimum building floor levels are sufficient to avoid tsunami and inundation exposure for at least the next 100 years for the 1,000-year ARI event, considering sea levels of 1 metre. Tsunami inundation is predicted to occur for larger magnitude events and with sea level rise values of around 2 metres. I note that resiliency measures can be used in the construction of the big box retail development to manage this residual risk over the life of the structures. These measures include locating critical services above predicted inundation level and using flood-resilient materials. And my rebuttal statement provided all further information requested by the expert reviewer, which dealt with the lower likelihood events beyond the recommended MFE guidance. In my view, the proposed development provides a safe and effective manner for dealing with the future coastal hazard risks that is proportionate to the risk to 2130 and potentially beyond, depending on the actual changes observed with sea level rise. These levels recommended provide a commensurate approach to the natural hazard risk.
Thank you for that, Mr. Runningham. I've only got one question, and you've sort of summarised it in your summary, where you say, as well as the effect of vertical land movement. Could you explain to me what that is and how it's factored into the...
Sure. So what we see around New Zealand is land levels are changing as a result of tectonic activity. Mm-hmm. And in this area in Ahuriri, whilst the earthquake raised land back in 1931, measurements done by GNS, and they've got gauges around the country, show that levels are subsiding or reducing. The studies that came out through the SeaRise website, which I use their information for, show those sea levels 3.2 millimetres a year, lowering and projected to occur over the next 100 years. So the relative sea level rise is taking into account that the substance of land in addition to the rise of sea level. So it's adding the differences to get the net relative sea level rise.
And the subsidence of land, they have relatively specific geographic areas where they're measuring.
Yes.
So your value was specific to this area.
Yes, and we have a scan around. Is there any change that should be considered that would be different? But this was a fairly high value for this area, and that was considered appropriate. We do check with the actual measurements of vertical land movement around the country, and it does show there's some new information put out on the GNS website that shows that we are getting substance in these land areas in the order of the average value, not the upper bound value that we use for this assessment.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Any questions?
No questions, but I'd invite you to sit down with Ms Morgan and Mr Holder and regarding those terms that I asked them about earlier on, proportional risk and cascading hazards, etc. Just help them do some wordsmithing so future decision makers can
Yes,
understand.
I have to say I haven't been involved with that project, so that's, yeah.
Yep, but you can be now, so
Yeah.
excellent.
But we'll make sure it happens.
Yeah.
Thank you. Questions?
Just one. So you've considered sea level rise, obviously, in your assessment, but I'm interested in your view, and I acknowledge it's not necessarily your area, but as it intersects with sea level rise, that sort of intensity and frequency of rainfall events and whether or not, as it relates to tidal environments like part of the stormwater network here is, if you've considered that effect, and perhaps it comes back to the cumulative discussion, but I'm just also conscious that depending on your answer to that, whether or not it's appropriate to describe in your summary the inundation of the parking lot as possible, putting those two things together.
Well, if I can clarify, coastal inundation of the parking lot for that term, because it was related to the sea level rise, and coastal inundation rather than pluvial. Could I suggest that that would be a really good question for the pluvial expert for Mana Ahuriri, who can talk about the rainfall intensity? That's probably more appropriate than...
Yeah, thank you. Happy to reserve that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr Ryan and him. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I think we're getting near the end of the list. Kevin Brewer is next. He doesn't have a summary statement, and he didn't produce a reply statement. I don't think he has a direct counterpart, so he hasn't been directly involved in conferencing. But I think some of the questions that the reporting officer had in terms of how urban design might still be addressed and considered in a future consent process is essentially dealt with in the planning response under the Severn development area overlay that is proposed. But look, I'll invite Kevin to say what he wishes by way of summary and then answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My evidence, the text is only 5 pages, so I'll try and summarise it in 3 or 4 statements. I think the first section of importance is the analysis of the existing environment, which shows how the industrial zoning presents to the street with inactive building frontages and bare bones compliance on front yard landscaping, just the nature of the land use. And that's important, I think, in gauging the opportunities that the large format retail zoning presents to enhance the streetscape amenity. So if you can imagine working your way in from the street edge of the site, you heard from Mr. Ehlers, that flooding stormwater mitigation can be turned from a constraint into an opportunity, in that you make a feature of it with the low level of planting that's appropriate to stormwater design. Immediately behind that, there is a road proposed, and that road has a site development purpose in that the staging of the site is in some unknown order, and therefore you may not be able to use the road immediately in front of the buildings. So that road is there to allow access across sites in the stage that it developed. But that constraint too became an opportunity because that provides you with the ability to put a tree-lined street frontage behind the landscape swale. The last suggestion in the urban zone opportunities was the little mini street, if you like, coming in off the roundabout. And that is there, obviously, to break up what's a large expanse of car parking because 58 Severn Street is much deeper than 51. It's sort of shunted back one drawing in the set to urban zone opportunity because how that works in terms of it skirts with the minimum site area, so it's a little bit uncertain compared to what you would get at anchors on the back of the site. But the suggestion is that it's there to break up that car parking frontage. So taking that forward to the Section 42 report, the comment from that is basically how do we lock these things in some manner going forward. And I guess, so I talked to Mr. Gardner-Hopkins and made a few comments and thought, well, that's good. But I've essentially left that process to Ms. Morgan and Mr. Holder, who will be talking after me, and what's appropriate to take forward into the provisions. I think that's all I need to say.
Okay, thank you. Just a few questions from me. You heard my questioning around the proposed rezoning of the roundabout area, Highway 2. Do you have any sort of views on that?
I've not been directly involved. That's come along later in the process, so I haven't been involved directly in it. When I was asked to include it on the drawing, I started asking about it. And so I had some discussions with Mr. Gardner-Hopkins, essentially, and he relayed to me the amenity provisions that him and Ms. Morgan have been discussing, and they cover the same areas. That's about building active frontages, about landscaping and breaking up car parking. So those provisions are consistent with what I'm proposing for the large format retail site, given I don't actually know what the exact land use is.
Okay. And it may be more relevant for Mr. Holder, but the particularly along Preverson Drive, provision of a open space or buffer or whatever you like to call it could be part of a master plan for the development area.
It could, yes. You don't have the constraint that might be an opportunity of the swale, but yes, if you want to be serious about streetscape amenity, you'd want to extend that.
Well, I'm thinking of locking things in. Yes. If it's critical to your assessment and to our deliberations, then that's one way of approaching it.
Yes, and Mr. Holder is the man too.
Okay. Because I will ask Mr. Holder too about, and it's the same question that arose with the previous rezoning request. Riverbend is that it's part of the provisions, district plan provisions, the actual development plan needs to be incorporated, so we all know what we're talking about and it's locked in, because that's quite a critical part of the development area provisions. This is our master plan, a structure plan, whatever it's called, for this area, and I think it will be important to lock that in as part of the set of district plan provisions if we were to recommend proceeding with it.
I understand that's the exact mechanism that's been proposed.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the panel?
Look, no questions, but the note I wrote to myself, and where I normally write questions, was nice pictures. If this happens, it's going to significantly improve the status quo of Preverson Drive.
Well, thank you.
No questions from myself. Thank you.
Just one thing that occurred to me. You're right about the large amount of car parking. If you compare, I'm just looking at your plan here. If you compare the amount of car parking you're showing to those large format retail on the other side of Preverson Drive, it is a huge swathe of parking. Is it based on parking requirements that might be generated by these activities?
I work with Mr. Georgeson on quantifying. I mean, it's a forward look. This plan was drawn for MAT to assess the site and what they can do. So it's a little bit more detailed than perhaps it should be for what we're doing, which is a plan change, and an outline plan might be more appropriate. But we thought to include that plan as context was helpful for decision makers. So given those GFA there, which is where they'd logically be, and we typically just take some of the operators who might be of the size, so you get typical footprints, and then I work with Mr. Georgeson on a car parking ratios that he tells me how to use to quantify the number.
Okay, thank you. Helpful. Thank you very much, Mr. Brewer.
If I could just comment briefly on the idea that a master plan or structure plan of some sort be embedded into the district plan. That, I guess, wasn't the original intention, and we've tried to achieve sufficient certainty as to outcome through the development area overlay. And it may be that there's a bit more work to do in terms of being more specific about frontage sort of design or open space, planting and the like. But as Kevin has said, this the images that you've seen really are working concepts that Mana Ahuriri have had produced to help their thinking and their testing with the market. But I would be concerned about this level of detail being embedded in the plan in terms of, the building size and particular sort of configuration. And I'll invite Mr. Holder to comment whether there is perhaps a less detailed version that could sensibly be included to ensure the key outcomes that are intended are clearly identified for the future.
Well, it's the latter I was thinking of.
Yes.
I wasn't thinking of converting that into the master plan. But, and as I said, it would be unusual for a development area in the plan not to have a master plan to go with it. So whether it's some sort of hybrid between that plan and that
Yes.
plan, I'll leave up to you and the council to confer.
I think in concept we're very happy to work to produce that sort of package.
Okay, thank you.
The sort of diagram you might consider would be similar to the ones that have been produced for the proposed residential area at Onehunga Road. I think that's the kind of level of detail.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just keeping an eye on the time, Mr. Gardner-Hopkins. We're 12:24 and we're due to break at 12:30, so I'm just wondering whether we actually break now.
Yes.
Rather than have Mr. Holder sort of be on hold over lunch and just have a sort of clear start after lunch. Would that be
Yes,
appropriate?
very happy with that. He's the last witness, so yes, he might be happy to reflect on some of the discussion and then return after the break.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry, just before you break, just in terms of Mr. Gardner-Hopkins, you talked earlier on in your presentation about some additional provisions. I think certainly rules and maybe policies relating to the proposed restoration area that's been a focus of discussion. So I imagine that would be a job given to Mr. Holder to come up with some provisions because they're not currently in front of us. So.
Correct. And I think if we are having something of whether it's called a master plan or a structure plan, then the restoration area could be clearly shown on that as well.
And you talked about a mix of restricted, discretionary and non-complying activity. So obviously there's some work to do on provisions and Mr. Holder would liaise with Ms. Morgan on that. So I don't think it's fair to get Mr. Holder to develop them over lunchtime, but maybe if he could just confirm that he understands the intent and he'll work with Ms. Morgan on that.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. You've done it. Excellent.
It would be obviously subject to what discussion was occurring today.
Okay.
But it's in terms of whether it's ecological, as you said in the summary of plan, I've already done that.
All right, well, that's even better. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With that, we'll adjourn the hearing until what time are we scheduled to read?
1:30.
1:30? Okay. We'll resume the hearing at 1:30. Thank you very much.